Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this particular video, I'm going to use as my focus the full moon in Leo on the 16th of February. But of course, I'm going to be looking at all sorts of things that are happening at the same time, just before, just after, because that setting for the full moon is going to make all the difference. So when we look at this full moon, I would think it's a rather romantic full moon on this occasion because it is so near Valentine's Day. But there's another reason why there's a certain sense of melancholy and romance and all those kind of things in the mix, is that, of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, this full moon is taking place when winter is at its harshest, it's at its coldest. Whereas when we look at the full moon in the Southern Hemisphere, it's a time when the summer is at its hottest, and we're seeing the full bloom of the summer. But the thing is that in 4 weeks' time, and the next full moon will be on the crest of the next season. So there's a sense of hope coming out of the full moon, in the sense that spring is only 4 weeks away. And also when we look at the Southern Hemisphere, autumn to a more cooling season. If we look back, or maybe we should think a little bit more about what this full moon entails. We've got the moon in Leo and the sun in Aquarius. They're opposite signs, obviously. And at the time of a full moon, the theme of endings, closure, and completion is always present. But when we look at these two signs and we think about Leo, which is a very individual sign, it's all about the individual. When we look at Aquarius, it's all about the group, it's all about humanity as a whole. So we have a real opposition going on here. And so we could say, to a certain extent, all of us will be facing issues to do with what's important to us individually and how those needs and wishes and desires need to be set against those of the wider community. And we're going to see things like this theme, if you like, very present in some of the rather more important global events. And what we might be looking at, of course, is difference of opinions, two opposing views. Can we find a balance between the two? Because always on a full moon, we're seeking to find a balance between two opposite principles. But, sometimes I think about, what does that mean, trying to find a balance between two opposite principles? Does it mean reaching a compromise? Well, hopefully, maybe two opposite ideas can be balanced out. But sometimes with a compromise, neither side is really truly happy. So I think we should have an ideal about this full moon, wherever it falls in our horoscope, that it is about balancing our individual needs against the needs and requirements of the bigger group, of the community, or even in terms of the globe. Now, another thing about this full moon is that it takes us back to August the 8th and the new moon in Leo. These are two moons, if you like, or dates that are connected. What you began in that middle of August period, or what happened that then went on to take a big part of your life, is now up for, sort of assessment at this time of the full moon. We're looking to see where those beginnings got us. And for some of us, it's going to be a case of what we started has got plenty of energy and life left in it. We're going to take it to the next level. We're going to keep on with it. Or we're going to look at it and think, well, I spent 6 months on this, and I don't think we've got really that far. So, maybe we need to phase it out in favor of doing other things and having our energies spent in other directions. And of course, this is a particularly important theme for Leos, because the new moon was in Leo on August the 8th, and now this full moon is in Leo on the 16th of August, the 16th of February. And it's really worth playing around with these ideas of cycles because it can lend a real meaning and understanding to the situations that are happening in your life at this particular point. Now, another kind of factor about this, of course, and I suppose I want to look at two things. The timing of the full moon, of course, is going to be different from country to country because of time zones. It happens at 4:58 in the afternoon when we're looking at the UK. And it's going to be actually the following day when we look at Australia, and then back in LA, then we're going to be looking at the sort of first thing in the morning time. So the full moon will occur at different times. Now, this is also important. Back we come to the idea of Valentine's Day, because the moon will be in Cancer for part of Valentine's Day, and then it'll move into Leo. And these, of course, are very, very different kind of entities. So I want to talk about this a little bit, because even if you think Valentine's Day is an over-commercialized kind of festival, it has nothing to do with love, really. Every day can be a celebration of love. And any day you can fall in love. It doesn't have to be on the 14th of February. But there's no two ways about it. You know, we're forced to notice the 14th. And it does become a measure of the health of our relationship around that time. If we're in a romantic relationship, you know, has it been, or is it going to be a special day where you spoil each other to bits and do very special things? Have you decided to get engaged on Valentine's Day, or does it happen on Valentine's Day? Or is it a wedding day itself? And lots of couples like to make their wedding happen on the 14th. So this year, we do have even more of a sense, not only that it is ultra romantic this year, but also that is very decisive. There aren't going to be any kind of halfway, you know, solutions. And this, in a way, is the nature of Leo and Aquarius. These are not half-hearted signs. You know, it's all or nothing. It's this way, it's that. I'm all in, I'm all out. And we get that kind of feeling because on Valentine's Day, the moon moves into Leo. Now, if you're in California, then the moon is going to enter Leo about 3:18 in the morning. So most of the day, you're going to find the moon in Leo, the sign of the heart, the sign of great romance. In England, we're going to be entering, or the moon will be entering Leo at 11:18 in the morning. So there's the rest of the day to get ultra romantic. And in Australia, over in Sydney, then it's going to be around about 10:18 at night. So that's really quite a long time to wait for the moon to get into Leo, into its romantic zone. But it is important because earlier in the day, while the moon is in Cancer, it's going to oppose Venus and Mars and then Pluto. There's going to be a very different type of kind of Valentine's celebration then. With the moon in Cancer opposing those Capricorn planets, is going to be much more intense. There are going to be some really kind of profound understandings made, and any kind of ending or beginning, completion and closure is going to be pretty dramatic. And when we think back, the previous full moon was in Cancer, and it was opposing Pluto. And I think these two time periods are connected because I think a lot of decisions regarding relationships were probably made around that full moon in Cancer. The reason being, not only does that come shortly after Christmas and New Year, and that's often a very decisive time for everybody thinking, I can't go through another Christmas with this relationship, but it's also about signals. And so if, for instance, you're not 100% sure about a relationship and you're thinking, you know, I don't think I want to continue in this relationship, then you're going to be starting to sow some seeds around that full moon way before we get to Valentine's Day, and it becomes really awkward. You know, we want to get things decided so that, you know, Valentine's Day isn't an embarrassment or a difficulty. So there will have been decisions made by the previous full moon. And now we come to this one, then we're getting that picture that this full moon is final. So let's have a look at this full moon on paper. Let's have a look and see what's going on. And as you can see, I have set this full moon for London. The reason being that I like to see where the moon is, it's rising, at this time. The sun is setting over on the western horizon. And of course, it's happening sort of in, the late afternoon, and you're seeing that portrayed here. But there are all sorts of interesting things about this chart, and I'm looking, and I think your eyes are probably drawn to Uranus, which is on the midheaven there, that television aerial right at the top of the chart. And although this full moon isn't squaring Uranus per se, you can see that it's still in relationship with Saturn. They're just below the horizon in the sort of 4 o'clock position. They're really still in orb of one another. And so particularly in the area of London, and there are probably all sorts of other capital cities where we're going to see Uranus really brought out very, very intensely, it means that certainly for Britain, we've got the idea that something pretty decisive is happening in our government at this particular time. Now, I also want to look at the degrees the degree that moon is in. It's at 28 of Aquarius. And that does happen to have a connection to the chart of Ukraine, also to the chart of the USA. In fact, the sun at 28 of Aquarius is the USA moon, bar a few little minutes or so. And we have the same kind of principle alive and well when we start to look at Ukraine, which is where Venus, its opposition Venus. So we are looking at these countries in particular for this full moon being a very, very important time of closure, of things coming to an end. And it will be different from, country to country, or in the cases of the USA, which I've just spoken about, or Britain. But we can see, depending on where Uranus is as well, some of these endings are very sudden. They're very abrupt. They're happening, in a heartbeat. But coming back and having a look at everything else that's going on here, you'll see in the 5 o'clock position, Venus and Mars. I was talking about that. They're in Capricorn. And a little bit further on, we've got Pluto. And up close and personal to Pluto is Mercury. In fact, Mercury and Pluto were in conjunction only a matter of days before the Leo full moon. So we've still got that impression of some very, very hard and difficult discussions, whether those are discussions between political enemies, or whether they're discussions between you and your boss, or whether they're discussions within the family. When you come to Mercury and Pluto, you're digging deep and you're coming out with solutions at the very, very core of a situation. And again, because Mercury has been retrograde, the first time Mercury met with Pluto was the end of last year, the 30th of December. It connected again on the 29th of January. And now finally, it's happening on the 11th, 12th of February. So we've got a kind of third time's a charm situation, and that maybe all sorts of discussions have gone on trying to resolve something, and it isn't until we get to around February the 11th, 12th, and then this all-important full moon that we finally get some idea. That's it. It's done. We're done. That's what we've decided. And of course, as we go on through to the end of the month, in the wake of the full moon, we're going to find Mercury conjoining Saturn. And as we get to the start of next month in March, we've got Venus and Mars on Pluto. So even if at the time of the full moon and Valentine's Day, we seem to have a little bit of a breathing space between some very intense developments individually and globally, By the time we start heading towards the very end of February, we're coming into the beginning of March, my goodness, things get all ratcheted up again. So let me come back to me. And what I want to do now is sort of take you through this full moon sign by sign. Now, for Leos, I've already mentioned this is a really very important full moon because of what happened 6 months ago at the new moon. So you really need to take that into consideration. What began is now completed, or at least a stage of it is completed. Now, for Leo, the moon is in your own sign, so it is all about you, me. But the opposite sign, Aquarius, where the sun is. So this is flanking the relationship axis. It's me versus we, which is why relationships, especially we just talked about Valentine's Day, are particularly important for both Leos and Aquarians. Things get decided. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a discussion that decides it. It's just the events around the time you come to a decision in your own mind. But for many Leos, it's going to be a case of, yeah, we've got a deal. This is it. It's a done deal. That's what we're doing. And for others, it's the idea we've come along this road far enough. This is it. We are going our own independent ways from this point. Now, Aquarius, of course, the moon is in the 7th house. And I always think that if the sun is in your own sign and the moon is in the opposite sign, you've really got to listen to other people. You've got to address their needs. So in a partnership, it's time to really hear your partner out. And in a funny kind of way, it's time to perhaps be a little bit more attuned to, attentive to, and considerate of your partner's feelings. And even if you're not in an official relationship, but you've got a relationship and you're the Aquarian and, we're looking at, the full moon here, it's just an indication that although we feel things and that's the prism of ourselves, we look at what's going on in life, sometimes we need to stand in the other person's shoes, walk a mile in the other person's shoes and see how it looks from their standpoint. And it'd be very, very important, Aquarius, to do this at this time. Put yourself in the shoes of other people, whether that is your significant other or whether, you're talking business or you're with friends or however it may be. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. Now, when we come to Taurus, we're looking at that full moon, the moon itself being in the 4th house and the sun in the 10th house. And this is the axis of life direction, pretty important one. So with the moon in the 4th house, I suppose emotions and feelings and your instincts are focused on things to do with your home and your family. It's a full moon, so again, we have the familiar feeling. Is it time to address the needs of your family and those you're close to and you live with, as opposed to your bigger plans, which may have to do with your future? The things you're focusing on, building a platform for yourself and getting out there and in the material world. It's now time to really put a little bit more emphasis on things to do with things that are close to home. We need to find the balance. And remember, I was talking about that a little earlier. It's good to seek a balance between those things that are material and out there in the world and those things which are more attuned to our home, our security, our family. There needs to be a balance between the two. Now, when we come to Scorpio, of course, we're looking at the reverse, really. We're looking at the moon in the 10th house, and we're looking at the sun in the 4th house. So again, we're still seeking to find that balance between our material needs and our efforts to find a place in the world, our platform, and things to do with our home life and our family. But with the moon here, it's also, again, a time when we sort of have to listen to other people, especially our bosses or people who we look up to, authority figures. it's a time to hear them out and to balance our, desires and needs against what we're hearing and what the status quo is for the 10th house. And maybe what we're seeing on a full moon on this axis is the end of a job or the end of a stage of a job, just as much as if we come back and think about Taurus, we're thinking about the end of being in a particular place. Is this the indication that you're going to be moving to a new home? You're saying goodbye to a place you've been in. And when we look at Scorpio, are you saying goodbye to a location where you've been working, or is it goodbye to the end of a job or even retirement we might see in this full moon? When we come to Pisces, and this is interesting, when I do these blocks of 4, all these signs are related by their quality or their modality. So we've just been through all the fixed signs. They're a family. That's why you find these signs flock together in relationships. I'm always finding the Aquarians with the Taurians and the Scorpios with the Leos. It's because they're your family. Your blood brothers. You have a sense of bond, even if your elements are very, very different. And that's what creates the contrast, the spark, and the attraction. So when we look at the next group I'm coming to, these are the mutable signs. So we're looking at Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius. They're united by a sense of seeking. And these are the seeking houses, if you like. The 12th house, the 6th house, the 3rd house, and the 9th house. That's where we're seeking things. So this full moon is about the completion of a journey. So if we come first to Pisces, and we're looking here at Pisces with the full moon in the 6th house and the sun in the 12th house, because the sun is in your preceding sign at the moment, and it's going to enter Pisces on the 20th of February. So it's just getting ready to come into your sign. So there is really a sense of dissolution. Now, that doesn't mean everything is, falling apart at the seams on this full moon. What it means is there's a process of dissolution going on, in the sense that you're sifting through experiences that are happening, have happened, and you're thinking, is this a time to continue with this trend, or do I need to put it behind me, whether it's an activity, a relationship, whatever it may be, even a dream or a goal. You're now assessing it, and it's a process of dissolution, tying up those loose ends in readiness to start a new chapter. When the sun comes into Pisces, and of course also the idea of the new moon in Pisces, which will be in about the 11th, 12th of March. So the moon in the 6th house also has a lot to do with organization. So it's a kind of organization in the sense of how does your life function? And of course, all of us, to a certain extent, we do things by routine. We have certain things, certain people we talk to every day, certain things we do every day. But sometimes they can be very time consuming, and they're getting in the way of our bigger goals. And this is certainly something, Pisces, you need to look at right now. What is it about your daily routine that's getting in the way of your dreams? Let's put it that way. If we come to Virgo, the opposite sign, we've got the full moon in the 12th house, and the sun is in the 6th house. So you've been going through quite a period since the sun entered Aquarius, of sorting and sifting anyway. You're trying to get your routine sorted out. You may have been looking at health and considering how to be fitter, healthier, stronger, more efficient. And now we come to this full moon. You're sort of seeing the results of your labors, really. And when you think how many of us at the start of a year, we decide we're going to eat healthier, we're going to go to the gym every day, we're going to do this, that, and the other. And it's sort of around about this time, we should be reviewing how successful we were. Did we manage to stay the course? And if so, are we getting results? Because then it's worth continuing with. Or on the other hand, are we saying, I tried, it hasn't made an ounce of difference, and so no, I'm giving that up for a while. The full moon, endings, closure, completion. But I think too, this full moon, particularly for Virgos, is about health. And I think if you've got any injury or a health condition, you're probably going to notice it a little bit more at full moon. You're going to feel it most. You're going to be more vulnerable to coughs, colds, and sneezes. And, your health comes under the microscope. So it's a time to consider your health and maybe start off on a new kind of regime. Now, when we come to Sagittarius, we're looking at this particular full moon being in the 9th house. And the 9th house, as I said a little earlier, all these houses are about seeking. And in the 9th house, we seek to broaden our palette. So maybe we travel to other countries, or we engage with people from different places. Maybe we're seeking to expand our knowledge and experience. So we're thinking about taking a course or doing something to add to our knowledge. That's what we do in the 9th house. And are we looking down the road at our long-term goals and what we're seeking to achieve in life? So this full moon is central to that. So there could be a sense of a journey at an end, which is perhaps a good thing. You've come to the end of a particular course. You've come to the end, maybe quite literally on that full moon. You've been traveling and here you are, you're back home, or you've reached your destination. And that journey will have taught you a lot. And I tell you why it's taught you a lot, because of its full moon essence, if you like. And often on a full moon, the journeys we do take are either more interesting or more difficult, convoluted. So coming to this end of a journey feel is, even if it's been difficult, has it been of value? And perhaps too, things need to be brought to a close. Maybe you've spent enough time on this learning situation, and it is time really perhaps to say, you know what, I need to travel in new directions, both in the way of experience and knowledge, and also in terms of maybe quite literal travel. Looking at Gemini, it's in the reverse. And here we have the full moon in the 3rd house. It's all about information. You're going to be getting some pretty important information around the time of the full moon. And that means that you can act upon it. You can take action. Now, this full moon experience, the sense of information reaching you, could come in the way of a conversation or a meeting, or it could come in the way of some kind of letter or text or email. But whatever it is, it's an acknowledgement of something. And from that information, you can begin to process, dissimulate, well, that's the wrong word, but, process the information and decide what you're going to do with it. But it may also be about your own kind of neighborhood, if you like, things that are happening quite local to you, and that things can be decided. Let's say you've been taking part in a committee on celebrations that are going to happen, and they're sort of done and dusted now. You've made your decisions, or maybe there's a community situation which you've been involved with. Well, this full moon should bring it to an end. But you too are seeking with this full moon. So you're seeking information, you're seeking knowledge. And maybe that knowledge is going to come through gossiping, the grapevine, or maybe it's going to come through your own efforts to find information that's relevant to you, relevant to your immediate circle, so that you can then take the next steps. So into our final group, we've got the cardinal signs: Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. Now, for Arians, this full moon is taking place in the 5th house. So we are in very romantic territory, things of the heart, things that have to do with joy, pleasure, creativity, bringing forth offerings from ourselves. This is 5th house stuff. May have to do with children as well. So the full moon is saying, we've completed a gestation period. Now, I've already looked at that gestation period, maybe having been about 6 months because of the new moon in Leo and the full moon in Leo. But there are other kinds of gestation periods. There can be a gestation period of 9 months for obvious reasons, because that's the time it takes for a baby to develop and then to be born. So there could be some Arians for whom birth is imminent, or the birth of someone close to you. There's going to be a new baby arriving. We could also look in terms of 3-month cycles. So there was a beginning of something and a stage to reach 3 months later. And that is particularly so with relationships. You meet somebody and 3 months later, you figure out, is this a goer? Is this relationship, does it have legs? Could we make a commitment to each other? So that needs to be borne in mind if you're in Aries with this particular full moon. You're at a stage where you're either going to continue a fairly new relationship, or it's a time when you're going to be thinking, oh, maybe it's not going anywhere. And of course, as I've talked about, 2 days after Valentine's Day, it's likely to be a decision, on many Arians' minds. But of course, we're looking at collaborations, creative projects, and we're thinking about the completion of an endeavor. And that can be a really good thing on the full moon, a sense that we've come this way, it's done, and I can really see what we've achieved. So it is a sort of, for Aries, almost a joyous sense of completion for you. And certainly you should be looking for the joy of creativity, the joy of everything at this particular time, because that's central to life as a whole. I mean, you may be successful, things may be running all right, but if there's no joy in your life, no joy in your heart, well, that needs thinking about, and that's what's coming up around this full moon. If we look at Libra, yes, the full moon itself is in the 11th house. And remember, I talked a little bit earlier about the individual versus the group, your individual needs versus the needs of the community or the greater part. And this is particularly so for Libra. And you are a very kind of balanced person. I mean, you do think about other people. How are other people doing? What is this decision about? It's not just about me, it's about how it fits in with everyone else. You are by nature that kind of sign. You're a people pleaser. But we need to notch this up a little bit more, I think, now. And it might have a lot to do with your needs and preferences as an individual, and what's good for the planet, or what's good for your fellow human beings. Is it okay to sort of, not farm organically, for instance? Is it all right to be eating almonds when they take so much water up? Are these situations to be thinking about at this full moon? What's good for the planet? What's good for my brethren, as opposed to what I like and what I want? And then a way to, I could also think about relationships that began 3 months ago or 6 months ago. They're at a critical point. Are you in? Are you out? Entirely depends. So our final 2 signs, we're looking at Cancer and we're looking at Capricorn. So we're thinking really with Cancer, we're thinking about your next door neighbor sign, Leo. The full moon is in the 2nd house. So here we're about things to do with your security and your stability, things to do with protection, things to do with survival. And in fact, this sort of group of houses, when we look at this group of houses, first, when we're looking at the 2nd house and we're looking at the 8th house, we're in the sort of axis of survival. And so that everything in any of these houses has to do with surviving. So this full moon is about financial survival. It's also about closure and completion, maybe to do with the property. We actually have that phrase in connection with property. When we're ready to move into the house, or the step prior to taking on a new house or selling one is that closure and completion stage. So it might have to do with the property. It might have to do with closing and completing a deal with financial implications. But also, if your finances are not in a good state, then that full moon will show you can't go on. Steps have to be taken to get things back in balance so that my life is stable and I am secure. That's the nature of the full moon for you, Cancer. For Capricorn, it's got another edge to it because the sun indeed may be in your second house, but the moon itself is in the 8th house. So here we have the emphasis on financial relationships. So you have financial relationships with banks and lending institutions and credit card companies. And if you're in a business, you have, financial relationships with people you do business with. And we also share finances when we're in a long-term relationship. We have to, that's part of the deal. So that's where this full moon is headed. And on the one hand, we can say, this is a time to settle financial differences. This is a time for a settlement or for something that, concludes something, maybe even an inheritance. But this 8th house is also about financial exchange, and sexual exchange as well. So this full moon does have a direct effect, particularly for Capricorn, on the satisfaction and fulfillment you are experiencing in a relationship, or what you aspire to do and you need or feel you need in your life in the sense of intimacy with another person. So this idea that it will emphasize the longing or yearning for togetherness at that level and intimacy, but it will also show where a relationship is falling short and where life is falling short on fulfilling you in those areas. So as I said a little bit earlier, this is a very, very decisive full moon. Things are either one thing or the other. There are no gray areas and no halfway measures. So having been through all 12 signs, I want to come to my ending. And now having talked about relationships so much on this video, I thought it was rather nice to end on a quote that I'm really, really rather fond of. And this is by Cahill Gilbrand, or Gilbrand, whatever you'd rather say. And it's, I'm going to read it because I don't want to get it wrong. It's a very, very long piece of text. But what it's talking about is the need to be an individual and the need for togetherness, which of course has been a bit of a theme of this video. And the bit I'm going to choose for you, which I'm going to say exactly, I'm not going to attempt to extemporize, I'm going to say it. It's sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone, even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. And I think that's something we all need to get right in life, is that we are individuals, we are on our own, but when we come together in a relationship, we want to be a unit, but that doesn't mean giving ourselves completely over to the relationship or to another person. We must still retain our individuality. That's healthy for a relationship. And we have to find that balance in a relationship. When we find that balance, there is happiness. But the other way around, whether we're too independent and off doing our own thing and we never join up with our partner, or whether we're sacrificing all our individual needs for the sake of the partnership or to do what the other person is doing, that balance is badly wrong. And I think this is an especially good time to think about the balance between being an individual and being part of a relationship. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time on my next video. Bye for now.